What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the new Jason Statham action flick, A Working Man, which reunites him with director David Ayer. They previously made the film The Beekeeper together, and they're working on a sequel. And it seems like Jason Statham and David Ayer, they've formed a very nice, lucrative, creative partnership that's going to serve them both pretty well. I think A Working Man is a very solid action flick. It's one of those by-the-numbers action flicks. I would not say it's a generic action movie, but it's one of those movies that takes very few risks and it's just trying to get on base as opposed to hitting a home run. But if what you're in the mood for this weekend is a 2-hour movie where Jason Statham beats the crap out of a lot of Russian gangsters, well then A Working Man will deliver. I took an edible about halfway through and it was kicking in right around the time of the climax. And so I don't know if the climax was particularly good or if just the drugs were kicking in, but I think the whole movie is fair until it really kind of finds its footing for the big climactic final battle where it was shootouts and knives and martial arts and all kinds of crazy shit. Very satisfying, very entertaining. But I should add that this movie had a few luminaries working on the screenplay before it hit the screen. First and foremost, Sly Stallone himself, Rocky, Rambo, the Tulsa King, all that good stuff. Sylvester Stallone was one of the screenwriters, and I think a lot of times people overlook the fact that if you look at Sylvester Stallone's career just as a screenwriter, even if he had never acted in a movie, even if he had never directed a movie, just as a screenwriter, he's had a pretty remarkable career, and I think he oftentimes gets overlooked as a screenwriter. And I just love the fact that he enjoys the writing process. But along with Sylvester Stallone, we have Chuck Dixon, who is a pretty famous comic book writer. He's one of the co-creators of the character Bane back in the early 90s. And of course, we all remember Bane when Tom Hardy showed up and beat 7 shades of shit out of Christian Bale in Dark Knight Rises. And I haven't followed a lot of Chuck Dixon's career in recent years, but apparently he wrote a book called Levon's Trade in 2014, which formed the foundation for A Working Man. But the basic premise for A Working Man is pretty straightforward, but here it is. Levon Cade left his profession behind to work construction and be a good dad to his daughter, but when a local girl vanishes, he's asked to return to the skills that made him a mythic figure in the shadowy world of counterterrorism. So there it is. You basically have a blue-collar guy working construction. He's working for a company run by Michael Pena. And Michael Pena has a long history with director David Ayer. I don't know how many movies they've made together, but at least a couple. In any case, it's Michael Pena's daughter who gets kidnapped by Russian gangsters while she's out partying. And Michael Pena basically says, like, even though you're kind of living incognito and retired, you need to go find my daughter. I will spare no expense. And of course, Jason Statham's like, I'm not that guy anymore. I'm not that guy anymore. You know, he's the reluctant warrior trying to leave his violent past behind. But of course, it takes like just a little bit of urging and a little bit of coaxing, and he's ready to start snapping necks and breaking arms and stabbing people in the chest and all that good stuff. But what I'm about to say could probably qualifies with a compliment as well as a criticism, because David Ayer and Jason Statham, I feel like they're a little overqualified for this movie. We've seen Jason Statham at this point in a million action movies as well as a million great dramas. I mean, I still feel like dramatically some of his best stuff was like Snatch back in the early days before he became a big giant martial arts movie star and that sort of thing. And David Ayer, we've seen him do superhero movies and cop dramas and war movies and gangster movies and all kinds of different movies. David Ayer knows what he's doing. He's got an aesthetic, he's got a style, he's got a certain tone that he likes to employ in his movies. I think David Ayer and Jason Statham are obviously uniquely equipped to deliver a very satisfying action movie, but perhaps the screenplay could have demanded more from them given their talents, because we know that Jason Statham has more range than this movie's asking from him, and David Ayer has more skills as a director than this movie's asking from them. However, at a time where the movie business is facing so many problems and contracting, and there's so much uncertainty and so many movies that are failing outright, there's something to be said for a director and a star who are like, you know what? We're just going to deliver a very solid, straightforward action movie that'll put butts in seats that people will enjoy, that will allow us to make another movie. Obviously, The Beekeeper fit that category, A Working Man fit that category, and I suspect that The Beekeeper 2 will fit that category. And at a time where so many people are losing their jobs or looking for work, sometimes it's just enough to deliver a straightforward, solid genre film. But when you look at David Ayer's past work as a director, which includes movies like Suicide Squad, which was kind of taken out of his hands and re-edited in a way that was not to his satisfaction back in 2016, or you have movies like Bright, which was made for Netflix, or movies like Fury. I think Probably Fury is my favorite movie of his. It's just a full-blown, kick-ass World War II action movie with great performances and great action. I think Fury is kind of slept on sometimes as a really cool, just solid movie. Like what is the World War II experience from the point of view of guys who live inside this fucking tank and are just raising hell? But as I was watching A Working Man, I kept thinking to myself, having David Ayer direct this is a little bit like getting in a Ferrari to deliver newspapers. Like, you can deliver newspapers on a rusty old bicycle, or you can deliver it like in a full-blown luxury vehicle. David Ayer is overqualified for this kind of movie. However, like I said, at this point when the movie business is facing so many problems, just surviving and getting to make more movies, sometimes that's enough. So on the whole, I did enjoy this movie, but I do have a few criticisms. First and foremost, it's very earnest, it's very sincere, it takes itself very seriously, and at a certain point, you're like, oh my God, like, can somebody just smile and crack a joke, or can we see a pretty girl, or can we see something that's not just Jason Statham being mean and grumpy, and and like shoving his hand through people's chests and pulling out the heart. I mean, there's nothing that gross in the movie, but he's just fucking people up the whole movie with barely breaking a sweat, and at a certain point, you're like, all right, I get it, like, maybe the movie goes on like 20 minutes too long, but it veers into potentially very exciting material with this club called Hattie's, where a biker gang is working. This biker gang, I think they're selling meth, or they're selling some sort of crystalline drug-like substance that Jason Statham is buying as a way of kind of getting in with all these gangsters. And the biker gang works for the Russian mafia. But inside Hattie's, the girls are wearing like spikes and leather, and all the guys are like sitting on like thrones with like metal skulls and all that. I mean, it's totally outlandish. I was like, all right, we're getting somewhere here. Like, David Ayer's getting a chance to lean into some style and some atmosphere, but I feel like those scenes could have gone a little harder in terms of like just like the extreme lifestyles, like drugs, sex, rock and roll, all that stuff. A little bit more red meat for people who like hardcore R-rated action movies. And this has got to be R-rated. Let me just double check. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, R-rated, hour 56 minutes. But in the earlier parts of the movie also suffers from a problem where sometimes it's hard to discern or appreciate or just see the action as it's unfolding. And for me, if you're going to see a great action movie, the choreography and the style and just basically the way the action is staged, that is the feature attraction. That is part of the joy of watching a great action movie. And if you can't perceive it due to murky lighting or shaky cam or just extreme close-ups or rapid-fire editing, I find that incredibly unsatisfying. Like, I'm wearing my Morning Combat t-shirt. Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell, they run this great YouTube channel about mixed martial arts and boxing. And I love mixed martial arts, and I love boxing, and I love combat sports. And when you're watching those sports, you can perceive the action. It's staged in a way and is lit in a way where you can actually appreciate it when something happens. And I feel like great martial arts movies, wherever they're made and whatever era they might have been made, the best action movies, you tend to be able to appreciate, or you typically are able to appreciate, all the nooks and crannies and nuances of all the technique that is on display. And I get it. Jason Statham, he's no longer a spring chicken. I'm sure he's thinking, what shortcuts can we employ to kind of disguise the fact that this is exhausting, demanding, like physically demanding work that we're doing here. But I feel like a long take where you can appreciate one move and like the way they kind of sequence together, that is part of the real joy of watching great action. And if Liam Neeson and Denzel Washington can still do action movies in their 70s, Jason Statham can still deliver a great action scene in his, 50 now? How old is Jason Statham? Let me have a quick check. All right, I'm seeing here that Jason Statham was born in 1967, so holy moly, he is coming up on 60 years old. That's amazing. Jason Statham is going to be 58 years old this summer. I had no idea that he'd gotten that old. All right, so we'll give him a pass for a lack of lengthy action sequences where one move is kind of seamlessly going into the next, but then lean into the guns. Give us machine guns, give us shotguns. And to be fair, there are some great shotgun scenes in this movie and some semi kind of sort of satisfying blood splatter. I feel like most action movies these days, it's tough when you grew up in the era of squibs and like movies by guys like Paul Verhoeven, where you're seeing like, blood and guts explode out of people when they get shot. Digital blood is never satisfying. I need like great visceral practical effects. I almost never see digital blood in any way, shape, or form involved with the shootout where it's satisfying. Or when you're seeing like, the report or like, anyway, the gunfire coming out of the muzzle, if it looks digital and added on, I'm sorry, it's just not satisfying. And if you can't make your gunfire convincing, then I'd rather the movie have no guns at all. And I know there are all sorts of safety concerns and that sort of thing, but find a way to do it safely and find a way to make it convincing. Otherwise, people will just watch combat sports instead of action movies. And for me, there's room in my heart for both. But another problem I have with the script, and this is going to sound incredibly hypocritical coming from me because I do cuss too much on this channel, but as a substitute for good dialogue, some of the villains in this movie, they just cuss a lot and scream fuck over and over and over again. And it loses all of its impact if you overuse the word. Like, just to give you an example, if I'm saying this movie cusses way too fucking much, I can't fucking believe how much they fucking cuss throughout the whole fucking movie, the word starts to lose its impact. And if an actor is just screaming it louder and louder to try to sell it, it just creates a sense of diminishing returns where you're like, just don't talk. Just kill people and do bad things, but please stop talking. So as a sample of their screenwriting talents, I don't think Sylvester Stallone or David Ayer or Chuck Dixon is going to claim this is their best work as writers. I mean, David Ayer, he helped write Training Day back in the day. That movie was fucking awesome. Once again, overusing the word fuck again. Sly Stallone, let me just check and see what movies he's written. Hang on one sec. I know he wrote Rocky 3 and 4, which I loved growing up. Saw them over and over and over again. But holy shit, he's got so many screenwriting credits, from Rocky to Paradise Alley to Rocky 2, 3. He worked on the screenplay for First Blood, Staying Alive, less said about that the better, Rambo, First Blood Part 2, Rocky 4, Cobra. I mean, it's ridiculous. Over the top. The list just goes on and on and on. I got to scroll up just to get to some more contemporary modern stuff. But he's got some writing credits on the show Tulsa King, which is a massive success. Yeah, Sylvester Stallone is no stranger to slamming his fingers into a keyboard. And Chuck Dixon, like I said before, he's a massive legend from the world of particularly DC Comics. He wrote a little bit of Punisher for Marvel for a while, but it was over at DC where he really made a name for himself. In any case, all three of these guys have written a ton of great stuff. I just don't think A Working Man is necessarily their best material as writers. But I will say is that they wrote some great scenes for actor David Harbour. David Harbour plays a soldier who's blind, but who served alongside Jason Statham's character, and he's kind of like his wingman and his buddy who can supply weapons for him or a place to hide and that sort of thing. David Harbour delivers this really cool performance in a movie that is otherwise characterized by kind of one-dimensional, kind of thin, superficial parts. Suddenly in the middle, David Harbour is giving us all this soul and pathos and just artistic integrity and that sort of thing. It's like, whoa, if the whole movie were littered with characters and performances like this, we might be having a different conversation about the merits of A Working Man. But what was cool about those scenes is that they give us something that's oftentimes lacking in a lot of contemporary movies, because I feel like a lot of writers just don't know how to do it. Male camaraderie. And people talk a lot these days about masculinity in movies or the lack thereof. A big part of masculinity in movies, the best, raw, masculine movies made in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and that sort of thing, is male camaraderie. If you watch a movie like The Wild Bunch, after they've pulled off this big train job, and they're throwing this bottle of whiskey around and they're all chugging from it, and at the very end the bottle's basically empty and Warren Oates doesn't get to have a sip and everybody laughs at him. That kind of male camaraderie is more or less absent from a lot of movies these days. But during these scenes between David Harbour and Jason Statham, you feel that male camaraderie, and so this is the kind of movie that a lot of guys will respond to. And we also get some cool camaraderie between Jason Statham's character and the character played by Chidi Ajufo, if I'm saying his name correctly. The character's name is Dutch, but he's the leader of the biker gang, and he's kind of an outlandish, over-the-top character, like I said. He sits on a throne with metal skulls and that sort of thing. But he and Jason Statham inevitably are going to have to kind of go to war. But there's this kind of reluctance where the true fight is not between them. The true fight is between Jason Statham and the people who kidnapped Michael Peña's little girl. And there's this kind of grudging respect that grows between the two of them over the course of the movie. So that was cool. So I guess in the final analysis, A Working Man is a perfectly fine movie, a perfectly watchable movie, perfectly enjoyable movie. But let's be honest, it's not going to replace anybody's favorite David Ayer movie or favorite Jason Statham movie. David Ayer, I like it when he's a little more hardcore, a little more gritty, and just a little bit more visceral in his overall approach. And with Jason Statham, I like when he plays roles that give him a chance to kind of express his more colorful side of his personality, whether that's a movie like Snatch or the Crank movies. Crank High Voltage? Is that the name of the sequel? Crank High Voltage is outrageous. And it has one of the funniest scenes of any action movie I've ever seen, where his girlfriend's trying to keep him alive by creating friction. His heart needs electricity to keep going, but they're having sex at a racetrack while these horses are jumping over them. It is outrageous. It's one of the most bananas action, not even an action, one of the most bananas scenes that I've seen in an action movie that I can remember. So that is the side of Jason Statham that I like to see him explore. But high five to Jason Statham and David Ayer for just keeping the trains running on time and making movies that are commercial and that can actually get made. And yeah, I will see Beekeeper 2. I will keep my expectations modest, but I do hope that both Jason Statham and David Ayer at some point get the opportunity to make the kind of movies that we know they're capable of, because I won't say A Working Man is beneath them, but this is just, it's too easy. It's not enough of a challenge for these two guys who are clearly very talented filmmakers. But I think that's about all I have to say about A Working Man. As far as upcoming action movies are concerned, I saw a really cool trailer for The Accountant Part 2, which is right around the corner. We also have Havoc to look forward to, starring Tom Hardy. Havoc is directed by the guy who did the Raid movies. Hang on, what is his name? I always get him confused with Gareth Edwards. With Gareth Evans? Yeah, Gareth Evans and Gareth Edwards. One of them needs to change their name so they're not quite so similar. And then, of course, we also have the Ballerina movie coming in June, which is set in the world of John Wick. So if you're an action fan, there might be potentially some good ones right around the corner. Fingers crossed. I love a good action movie. The genre really seems to have been in a state of decline over the last 10 years, unless it's like kind of interwoven with like a superhero movie. Like Captain America Winter Soldier is a good action movie. It does also happens to be a superhero movie, but I grew up in the 1980s, the great heyday of like the full-blown, straightforward action movies starring Chuck Norris and Van Damme and Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and all those guys. And yeah, I'm always in the mood for a good action movie, but it needs a little something extra, whether that's crazy style or great music or great sex appeal or great comedy, something to give it just a little edge over your run-of-the-mill generic action movies. I don't think A Working Man quite gets the job done, but if you are a fan of Jason Statham and David Ayer, it's well worth a look. In any case, I hope everybody has a great weekend. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all the good stuff, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.